Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to some new members of our Patreon family: Cindy, Madeline, and a special happy birthday shout out to Penny from Allie, who bought you a Patreon membership as a gift, which is pretty adorable. Thank you all so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. And because you supported us in the month of May, all of you will be entered into a raffle at the end of the month, the prize for which is our first ever offer of some swag. This time we'll be having multiple winners, so if you want to find out more about what's available, check out our links for Patreon or buymeacoffee.com in the show description. Good luck and thanks to all of our supporters this month. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with a handbook to some of the world's greatest treasures. Spices, their histories. Valuable information for grocers, by Robert O. Fielding. First published in 1910 by the Trade Register Incorporated, Seattle, Washington. Let's begin. Introduction. The history of spices, with other valuable information to all branches of the grocery trade, was originally written by Robert O. Fielding of the staff of the Trade Register, in which the several articles appeared in various issues of that journal, duly protected by copyright, with the accompanying illustrations. Retail grocers everywhere will find this little book of a special value for study and reference. It is all meat for the salesman who realizes that success in trade these days depends upon knowing where the goods he handles were produced, how to judge their qualities, how they are prepared for market, and what are their uses. How to sell, the market conditions, etc., are continuously set forth in the weekly issues of the Trade Register, $2 a year, by men who have had practical experience behind the counter. Lovett M. Wood, Editor. Spices, their histories. Allspice or pimento, a valuable product from Jamaica, which combines the flavor of cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Allspice is the dried, unripe berries of a tree of the myrtle family, the pimento, known botanically as Eugenia pimenta or Pimenta officinalis. It's an evergreen tree some 20 to 30 feet high, with a slender, straight, upright trunk, much branched at the top. The bark is smooth, gray, and aromatic. The leaves, which when fresh abound in essential oil, are 5 inches long, of an oblong shape and deep, shiny green color. The blossoms, which appear in July and August, are white and fragrant. The berries, sometimes called corns, which form on the disappearance of the flower, are picked unripe, although fully grown. they are of a greenish-purple color. After picking, the berries are dried in the sun or in kilns until dark brown and then separated from the stalk. The dried berries are light, brittle, of roundish form, and crowned with the remains of the flower calyx in the shape of a raised, seared-like ring. Each berry contains 2 dark brown, flattish, kidney-shaped seeds. If allowed to ripen, the berries lose their aromatic flavor and become merely sweet and pulpy. Only in Jamaica, where it is cultivated in plantations called pimento walks, does the pimento tree grow to perfection, although attempts are made to cultivate it in other West India islands and South America. It is thought to combine the flavor of cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, hence it is called allspice. Uses. Its chief use is for culinary purposes. It is a powerful irritant, good for dyspepsia, flatulency, gout, hysteria, and toothache. It is often employed to disguise the nasty taste of medicine. Allspice yields volatile oil by distillation, which is used as a flavoring in alcoholic solution, is of a brownish red, clear appearance, and has the odor and taste of pimento, but is warm and more pungent. A green fixed oil has the burning aromatic taste of pimento and is supposed to be the acrid principle. A tincture from allspice has been praised as an application in chilblains. Substitutes. The Mexican spice called pimento de Tabasco is somewhat larger and less aromatic than Jamaican pimento. The berries of pimento acris, bayberry, whose leaves are used in the manufacture of bay rum. The Carolina allspice, Calycanthus florides, a shrub 6 or 8 feet high, with an odor somewhat like strawberries. Japan allspice, Chimonanthus fragrans, which grows in Japan, and wild allspice, Lindera benzoin, known also as spicewood, feverwood, Benjamin bush, a member of the laurel family growing in the United States. To secure uniformity of color, these inferior kinds are often colored with Armenian bole, a kind of red clay from Armenia, and they are also often mixed in ground allspice, in addition to the stalks of the pimento. During the Civil War, when pimento was high in price, a substitute was made up of clove stems, wasted rye, a little cayenne pepper, and some cassia. This was very acceptable, although there was not an ounce of pimento in it. Capsicum. Cayenne pepper is made from this branch of the nightshade family. Descriptions of the various varieties of capsicum. Tabasco pepper sauce. The capsicum is a genus of plants of the nightshade family, Solanaceae, that grows luxuriantly in all tropical countries, and many species of which are cultivated in the temperate zone. Capsicum or red pepper is of American origin for these reasons. Fruits so conspicuous, so easily grown in gardens, and so agreeable to the palates of the inhabitants of hot countries, would have very quickly diffused throughout the Old World if they had existed in the south of India, as it has sometimes been supposed. They would have had names in several ancient languages, yet neither the Greeks, Romans, nor the Hebrews were acquainted with them. They are not mentioned in ancient clinic books. The islands of the Pacific did not cultivate them at the time of Cook's voyage, in spite of the proximity of the Sunda Isle, where Rumpfiends mentions their very general use. The Arabian physician Ibn Bathar, who collected in the 13th century all that Eastern nations knew about medicinal plants, says nothing about them. Probably the first known history of cayenne pepper in Europe is that given by Martyr, who writes of Columbus bringing it home in 1493, and speaks of it being more pungent than that from Caucasus, probably referring to the oriental black pepper. About a century later, Gerard writes of its being brought into Europe from Africa and southern Asia, and being grown in European gardens. Probably the first record of its use is that by Dr. Chanka, who was physician with Columbus's fleet in 1494, and who alludes to it as a condiment used in dressing meats, dyeing, and other purposes, as well as a medicine. From the ground-dried seeds and pericarp of certain varieties of capsicum, we get cayenne pepper, so called from Cayenne in French Guiana, South America, whence it was imported by the French. Cayenne pepper is also called Calicut and Nepal, the names of places of export, and it was known as Guiana pepper over 300 years ago. The derivation of the word capsicum is uncertain. It may be from capto, hot, on account of its pungent taste, or from capsa, a box or chest, referring to the form of its fruit. The plant grows from 1 foot to 6 feet high and is fairly well branched. The flowers are white or greenish white. The fruits of the several species are of various forms, round, oblong, cordate, or horned, and contain a number of flattish seeds. The seeds, after the removal of the pericarp, and then thoroughly washed and dried, are entirely devoid of acidity and pungency. The hotter and drier the soil, the more acrid and pungent the fruit. Used in moderate quantities, capsicum or cayenne pepper promotes digestion and so prevents flatulence. The natives of Brazil boil the capsicums and dip their manioc bread in it, making a kind of fiery soup. They are extensively used in India in compounding curries and chutneys. In Bengal, the natives make an extract from the small capsicum chilies of about the consistency of molasses. The bell peppers are pleasant stuffed with meats, fish, other vegetables, etc. The sweet and mild kinds fed to birds are said to improve their plumage. Capsicum annum is the most common species and contains a great many varieties. Among them the pimiento, not pimento or allspice, commonly known as Spanish red peppers or morrones, also paprika or Hungarian sweet pepper. This species is never found growing wild. Capsicum frutescens is sometimes called goat pepper and is generally described as the true cayenne. Its leaves are from 3 inches to 6 inches long by 2 inches to 3½ inches wide. The fruit is red, obtuse or oblong acuminate, 3/4 to 1½ inches long, and 1/4 to 3/4 inch in diameter. It is very acrid and pungent. It is only cultivated in the tropical regions, as the seasons in the temperate climate are not long enough to mature the fruit. Capsicum baccatum is ovate of sub-round and about 1/4 inch in diameter. Capsicum baccatum have been known in the English gardens since 1731. Capsicum faticulatum, also known as Mexican chilies, is a shrubby plant of Sierra Leone and grows in Zanzibar. Also known as small chilies or red cluster peppers. The fruit, which grows erect, is oblong linear, not quite an inch in length, and of a deep red-orange color. Another variety, which are mostly consumed locally, have larger red and yellow fruit. Zanzibar capsicums or chilies are dirty looking, of a brownish red color, and very hot. A variety from Japan are bright red, not so pungent as the other grows, but of finer aroma. Capsicum cereciform fruit is spherical, subcordate, oblate, or occasionally pointed. The flesh is firm, from 1/12 to 1/2 inch thick and very pungent. From the shape of its fruit, it is called the cherry capsicum or pepper. Capsicum grossum, originally from India, grows 2 feet high, with a few branches and large leaves 3 to 5 inches long. The fruit is large, oblong or ovate, and is known as bell pepper. It is mostly used for stuffing and pickling, the skin being thick, soft, and tender, and of a mild flavor. Capsicum aberciatum, with ovate fruit about 2 inches long. While this variety is used to some extent for pickling, it is cultivated more as an ornamental plant. Capsicum longum grows to about 3 feet high, with comparatively few branches. The fruit is often a foot long and 2 inches in diameter. The flesh is thick and flavor mild. Capsicum acuminaceum is about 2 1/2 feet high. The fruit, which is small, grows both erect and pendant. Capsicum conordes, with oblong linear fruit, which grows erect, is very acrid and pungent. It is known as Tabasco capsicum or pepper. Bird pepper, bird's eye chilies, red bird pepper, etc., are commercial names given to the mild, sweet varieties of capsicum on account of their being fed to birds. Nepal pepper, commercial name for capsicum imported from that place in India. Nepal pepper has an odor and flavor resembling orris root, and a pod the color of amber when dried. It is most esteemed as a condiment, being aromatic and appetizing, and not so acrid or biting as is most cayenne. Paprika, commercial name for the mild, sweet varieties of capsicum, chiefly grown in Hungary, Spain, Portugal, Jamaica, Japan, and Zanzibar. Japanese pepper is the fruit of Xanthoxylum, an entirely different genus of plants to the capsicum family. The fruit capsules, when bruised, are agreeably pungent and aromatic. It is much esteemed as a condiment in China and Japan. Tabasco pepper sauce originated with Mr. E. McElhenney of New Iberia, Louisiana, in 1868, from a variety of capsicum in which the fruit grows erect. and was brought by a soldier friend of Mr. McElhenney from Tabasco in Mexico after the close of the Mexican War. Tabasco ketchup originated with Mr. George Bale of St. Louis, Missouri. The base of it is said to be equal proportions of powdered capsicum and essence of tomatoes. Ground cayenne pepper soon loses its bright color when kept too long or exposed to the light, and becomes dingy in appearance, so it is not always wise to judge by looks alone, as red ochre, turmeric, mustard, rice, sawdust, salt, brick dust, etc., have been found in cayenne pepper. The large fruits or pods are commercially known as capsicums, and the smaller ones as chilies. The term pepper is a misnomer as applied to this spice. Cinnamon and cassia. The sweet wood of Ceylon and the aromatic bark of the present day, often confused with cassia. Valuable trade history. Cinnamon. As in the case of sago and tapioca, a good deal of misconception prevails in regard to cinnamon and cassia. And as with sago and tapioca, one is often sold for the other by the uninformed. The word cassia, botanically speaking, has nothing whatever to do with the aromatic bark which we call by that name, but refers to a genus of plants of the bean family, from which are derived the dried senna leaves, an infusion of which our mothers induced us to take by the bribe of a piece of candy, although we had tummy ache for a brief space afterwards. The word cinnamon is derived from two Malayan words. Cassia from the Greek word cassian, which occurs in Psalms 45:8 and elsewhere in the Bible, where it is supposed to refer to the aromatic bark of the present day, was afterwards tacked on. That cassia the bark was known in biblical times is well authenticated. It is mentioned in a Chinese herbal published in 1700 BC under the name Kwai. The earliest mention of cinnamon is in a list of offerings by Selenenius Calenius, king of Syria, and his brother Antiochus Hyrax, to the temple of Apollo at Miletus, 243 BC. Among the gifts mentioned are 2 pounds of cassia and a like quantity of cinnamon. From this it appears there was then a recognized distinction between the two barks. We do know that the cassia was obtained from China, but the source of the cinnamon is unknown, unless it was obtained through the Chinese from Ceylon, the inhabitants of those countries being in frequent intercourse in ancient times. For the earliest mention we have of cinnamon as a production of Ceylon is by Qazwini, an Arab writer of about 1275 AD. That cinnamon and cassia were extremely analogous is proved by the remark of the Greek physician Galen, 130 to 200 AD. Quote, "The finest cassia differs so little from the lowest quality of cinnamon that the first may be substituted for the second, provided a double quantity of it were used." End quote. With this brief historical sketch, we will now endeavor to point out the differences between the two barks. In the first place, the word cinnamon refers solely to the cinnamon zeylanicum plant of Ceylon, where it is found growing wild, and was first brought under cultivation by de Cock in 1770. Here again, as with cloves, mace, etc., the Dutch tried to monopolize the trade. The giving away of a plant was punishable by flogging, and the destruction of a plant involved the penalty of death. The tree grows to the height of 20 or 30 feet, having a trunk 12 to 18 inches in diameter. The leaves are of a thick, leathery texture, 4 to 6 inches long, very smooth and shining on the upper surface, glaucous with prominent netted veins on the underside, and are traversed by 3 or 5 ribs. The flowers are greenish-white and appear in clusters of 3s. The fruit is an oval berry, not unlike an acorn in shape and color. The tree flowers in January and the fruit ripens in August. When the branches are peeled, the finest sticks are said to be derived from the liber of the middle-sized branches, an inferior sort from the younger shoots, and that which is procured from the thickest branches is considered of little worth. The peeling commences in May and lasts until November. The shoots or branches, usually about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in diameter and from 3 to 5 feet long, are cut off with a curved pruning knife, tied up in bundles, and carried to the peeling sheds. The bark is removed with a small round-pointed knife, with a small projecting rib or cutter placed at right angles to the edge of the knife. With this knife, the bark is split lengthwise up the stalk. It is then carefully loosened from the wood for a short distance on either side of the slit. A similar incision is made on the opposite side, and the bark is finally removed. The bark is then put in piles, covered with scrapings and matting, and left for about 2 days, during which time a sort of fermentation takes place, which greatly facilitates the separation of the outer part of the bark from the cuticle and epidermis, which is carefully done by scraping with a small curved knife having a slightly serrated edge. This process is called piping. The piper sorts the bark as he scrapes it. He selects a slip suitable for the outer layer about 3 feet long and packs within it 6 or 8 other pieces, all about the thickness of vellum paper, a mark which always distinguishes Ceylon cinnamon from cassia. They are then rolled up together and exposed to the sun to dry. It now resembles a tight roll of paper, the best quality being firm and compact, of a golden yellow color, smooth on both outer and inner surfaces. The cheaper grades are not so carefully made, having many short pieces in the pipes or quills, and not so much attention is paid to obtain uniform size and color. At Colombo, it is sorted into 3 kinds by government inspectors. The 2 finest kinds are exported, the 3rd with the broken pieces being reserved for obtaining oil of cinnamon. It is formed in bales about 90 pounds each, and wrapped in double cloths made of hemp, and not, as stated by some, of the cocoa tree. Guava bark, soaked in the water left after the distillation of cinnamon oil, and rubbed over with cinnamon oil, is sometimes placed inside good cinnamon quills, and then it takes a man of Solomon's wisdom to detect the fraud. Cassia. Cassia, under the name of kwai, is mentioned in the earliest Chinese herbal, that of the Emperor Shen Na Ming, who reigned about 2700 BC, in the ancient Chinese classics, and in Ri Ya, an herbal dating from 1200 BC. In the Haiyao Penxiao, written in the 8th century, mention is made of Tian Chu Kwai. Tian Chu is the ancient name for India, perhaps an allusion to the cassia bark of Malabar. In connection with these extremely early references to the spice, it may be stated that a bark supposed to be cassia is mentioned as imported into Egypt together with gold, ivory, frankincense, precious woods, and apes in the 17th century BC. The accounts given by Dioscondes, Ptolemy, and the author of the Periphetes of the Erythraean Sea that cinnamon and cassia were obtained from Arabia and Eastern Africa, and we further know that the importers were Phoenicians, who traded by Egypt and the Red Sea with Arabia, and it was imported hither from southern China. Cassia, according to Marshall and others, is the bark of the old branches and trunks of the cinnamon Xylonicium, while others assert that it is the bark of an entirely different species, namely cinnamon cassia, a native of China, but also grown in Java. This view is the more probable, as no cassia is exported from Ceylon, it almost all coming from Canton. Regions have also very different effects on the infusion and oil of these two barks, which conclusively shows that they are obtained from different species. Cassia comes in bales 2 to 4 pounds, bound by strips from the bark of some other tree. The pipes or quills are thicker and rolled once or twice, and never contain thinner pieces within. The diameter of the bark is much thicker, harder, and not as carefully scraped. The color is a deeper brownish fawn color. The taste is more acridly aromatic, pungent sweet, at the same time more powerfully astringent. Cassia is often substituted for cinnamon. It is adulterated with Cassia lignea, the bark of a degenerate variety of cinnamon growing in Malabar, Penang, and Sylhet. Other varieties of cassia are Saigon cassia, the bark of an unknown species which appeared in commerce about 1875. The outer bark is not removed, has a gray or grayish-brown color, is covered externally with whitish blotches, warts, or wrinkles. Cassia aromaticum is believed to be the cinnamon of China and Cochin China, growing in the provinces of Guangdong and Guangxi. The leaves are very much larger than the Ceylon tree, hang down from the stalks, and have never more than 3 ribs. This is the species that yields the cassia buds. Cassia tamala is a native of India, wild in Dirwani and Gongachora. It is cultivated in the gardens of Rangpur. The dried leaves have an aromatic taste. Cassia loreri grows in the lofty mountains of Cochin China, to the west towards Laos. The flowers of cassia are produced by this species. The old and young branches are worthless, but the middle-sized shoots produce a bark that is superior to that of Ceylon. None of it is exported. Cassia kulilawan is a native of Amboina. The bark, when dry, is aromatic like cloves, but less pungent and sweeter. It is used by the natives of Amboina as an internal medicine and as a stimulating liniment. Cassia rubrum grows in Cochin China and contains an essential oil smelling of cloves, but not so agreeable. Cassia sintok is a tree about 80 feet high, growing in the Nilgiri Mountains of India and the higher mountains of Java. The bark is of the same quality as the Amboina cassia, but not so agreeable. It is more bitter and powdery when chewed. Cassia xanthanuron is a native of the Papuan Islands and the Moluccas. The bark, when fresh, is very fragrant, but it soon loses its quality. Cassia nitidum is a native of India. It is a shrub or small tree. Cassia javanicum grows in Java and Borneo. It is a tree of about 20 to 30 feet high. The dried bark is of a deep cinnamon brown color, more bitter than the Ceylon cinnamon, and the leaves, when rubbed, have a sharp aromatic odor. Cinnamon of the Ceylon type is cultivated in Guyana, the Isle of St. Vincent, Cape de Verde, Brazil, the Isle of France, Pondicherry, Guadeloupe, and elsewhere. There is, however, no probability that the tree will succeed as an article of commerce that has not the hot, damp, insular climate and bright light of Ceylon. The barks of all these different species, including that of Ceylon, are classed as cinnamon in the pharmacopoeias of Austria, Germany, Hungary, Russia, the United States, France, Spain, Denmark, and Switzerland. While in the United Kingdom, cinnamon must be the bark of the Ceylon plant, Cassia zeylanicum, the others being classed as cassia. Oil of cinnamon. Oil of cinnamon is made from the pieces and chips of the bark. It is of a red, yellowish color. 80 pounds of bark yields about 8 ounces of oil. It is very stimulating. It is often adulterated with oil of cassia buds, oil of cherry laurel, and oil of bitter almonds. The latter is a very dangerous mixture. Cinnamon leaves yield an oil resembling oil of cloves, with which it is often mixed. The ripe berries of the cinnamon tree yield a volatile oil, similar to oil of juniper, and from the root is obtained camphor. Cassia oil is obtained from the leaves, buds, or bark. It is of a golden yellow color, but turns brown with age. It is considered good for influenza. Cassia buds resemble nails with heads of different size and shape, according to the period of growth when collected. There is also a kind of wild cinnamon or cassia which grows in Cuba, but its taste resembles more that of cloves than of cinnamon. Cloves. Interesting history with illustrations showing flower, bud, and fruit, where grown, and commercial uses. Cloves are dried, unopened calyces or flower buds of the clove tree, Caryophyllus aromaticus, a kind of myrtle, a native of the Molucca Islands. In commerce, they are chiefly distinguished by their place of growth and rank in the following order: Penang, Bencoolen, Amboina, and Zanzibar. In addition to these, there enter into commerce as secondary products clove stalks, and mother cloves, or the dried ripened fruit. The bulk of these secondary products are shipped from Zanzibar. The clove tree is an evergreen, 15 to 30 feet high. It has a thin, smooth bark and adheres closely to the wood, which is a gray color and of little use. The leaves are 3 to 5 inches long. The upper side and footstalk is red, shading to a dark color, while the undersurface is green. The flowers grow in small bunches at the extremities of the boughs, very like the flower buds of the lilac tree, and all are of a delicate purplish color. The calyx is long and forms the seed sac. The calyx changes color from yellow to red. If allowed to remain on the tree after this, the calyx swells like that of the rose. In this state, it loses its pungent properties and is called mother clove, and is practically of no value as a choice spice. The cultivated trees are kept pruned to about 8 or 10 feet in height. The harvesting of the flower buds commences immediately after they assume a bright red color. Such blossoms as can be reached are plucked by hand, while those that grow on the upper branches are beaten down with bamboo poles and caught in cloths spread beneath the trees. They are then dried in the shade or by hanging on hurdles over slow wood fires. They lose about half their weight in the drying process. They are usually finished off in the sun, which gives them a darker color. The quicker they are dried, the less the loss of aroma. Good cloves have a strong aromatic smell, a hot, spicy taste, and a light brown or tan color. The season for harvesting is from September to March. A 10-year-old tree yields about 20 pounds of cloves a year, the yield increasing up to 100 pounds for a 20-year-old tree. Penang cloves are from the Straits settlements. They are large, plump, and of a bright color. Amboina cloves are not so large as the Penang and are of a dark brown color. Zanzibar cloves are smaller than the Amboina, a bright reddish color and generally very dry. Pemba cloves are small and dark in color and mostly arrive in a damp condition and therefore lose weight if kept long. Cloves have sometimes a portion of their oil extracted, which gives them a pale, thin, shriveled appearance, although they may be freshened up by rubbing with a little oil or passed off by mixing with good cloves. Cloves that have been tampered with have a good proportion of their heads or knobs off, although another cause for headless cloves is that they may have been gathered when too ripe. Pure oil of cloves is almost colorless, with a faint yellow tinge, and the strong smell and burning taste of cloves. When old, it turns to a reddish-brown color. It has a greater specific gravity than water, in which it will sink. Clove stalks and mother cloves are used in the manufacture of ground cloves and mixed spices. In Brazil, the flower buds of the tree whose bark furnishes clove cassia are often used as substitutes for true cloves. The clove tree attracts so much moisture that herbage will not grow beneath its branches, and the clove of commerce has such an affinity to water that if placed near a vessel of water, they will absorb enough of the moisture in a few hours to appreciably increase their weight. It is said that dealers often take advantage of this to increase the weight of their goods and thus enhance their profits. A little clove history. This spice was well known to the ancients and is mentioned by several Chinese authors as in use under the Han Dynasty, BC 266 to 220, during which period it was customary for the officers of the court to hold the spice in their mouth before addressing the sovereign, in order that their breath might have an agreeable odor. At this period, the clove was called fowl's tongue spice. In 1265 AD, the price was 12 shillings per pound. In 1609, a ship of the East India Company called the Consent brought 112,000 pounds to England, which was sold at 5 shillings 6 per pound. As was the case with nutmegs, the Dutch attempted to control the business in cloves. With this object in view, they caused all the clove trees to be destroyed except those of the island of Amboyna. The natives of the island were compelled to rear a certain number of plants each year, and also to protect the bearing trees. The French, however, found a number of clove trees growing wild in the smaller island, and Poivre, French governor of Mauritius, who obtained the plant from the island of Gueby, introduced the clove tree into that colony in 1770. About 1800, an Arab named Harameli ben Salah took some seeds and plants from Bourbon to Zanzibar and commenced the cultivation of cloves in that country. The word clove is derived from the Latin clavus, nail, owing to its nail-like appearance. And with that, I think we'll end this evening's reading from Spices, Their Histories. I found a lot of that surprisingly interesting. I had no idea how cinnamon was processed. I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you'd like to read this work for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, the best place to catch me is on Twitter at BoringBooksPod, or drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.